Hello, family. Here we are back for part two. Thanks for coming along. So, there's this thing called the carrot and the stick, right? So, I should also mention that just before that heart attack kind of scenario, first attempt on my life, a buddy of mine who had separated a few years before me, I was still active duty. He was a civilian. Well, he sent me this video called Loose Change, and I watched it at home on my personal laptop, of course. And it started ringing some bells because, by that point, by 2009, I was already, saying to myself, well, look, we went to Iraq like in 2003 and looking for weapons of mass destruction, and where are those, and the other was Afghanistan. We've been there since 2001 and can't find Osama bin Laden or whatever we were supposed to be doing over there. Found lots of heroin though and other stuff. So yeah, so I started questioning things, and here comes the carrots and the sticks. So following the stick of almost having a heart attack, came the carrot, which was a promotion to major, a promotion for which technically I was not eligible, because out of all the 5 criteria that you have to meet in order to be considered for promotion to major, I had only met one of those criteria. So I got a call to the 3-star general's office. So I got to leave my my underground military base and go outside into this building with windows and doors and stuff, and without all the cipher locks and everything. The 3-star general promoted me to major, right? So that's all good, I already made up my mind that I was gonna punch out, because I was having some very serious doubts about the organization for whom I worked. And so you can't just like quit the military. You have to like give them 6 months notice, at least. So a month after I got promoted, I dropped my paperwork to retire. And from that moment on, so that brings us to 2010. Can't recall exactly the month. It might have been like September or somewhere in there. So the handlers that were already sort of, like lurking around me and causing problems for me, well, they turned it up big time. Gave me another sort of nervous breakdown. The energy weapons too were really intense, as well as all the medications and stuff. And I guess the idea was to give me another heart attack, this one being fatal or whatever. So that wasn't working apparently. So what they did next was they went to the commander, who was the same rank as me. She was a major, and they were a lieutenant colonel and a colonel. And nowhere even in my rating chain, these individuals. But they went to the commander and said, you need to read Major Price her rights and have her arrested and thrown into the brig. Kind of like Bradley Manning, never to be heard or seen again. So, not not shitting. This happened. So, um, well, all those schools that I didn't get a chance to go to. I did attend, you know, university for 24 years and got 3 graduate's degrees, and very well indoctrinated. Um, I did not have, however, the opportunity to go to all the in-residence elite military universities. But I took the effort and time to study the material via correspondence. So by that point, I had already read through, I think, 4 different general officer reading lists. They called general officer required reading. um, and I was familiar enough with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, or the UCMJ. So I simply said to the commander, I would like to make my phone call now. And I rang the Area Defense Council, the ADC, and I put him on speakerphone in the commander's office. And I said, I've just been read my rights, but I haven't been given a list of charges. What do you have to say about that? And of course, he told the commander, if you don't back down, I'm going to have your job. In not exactly those words, but roughly, más o menos, right? And I think she did end up losing her job, and I hope she's doing well. I wish her no ill will at all. She was pressured into doing this by these 2 individuals who outranked her, so I understand that. No grudges. So anyhow, that was the second attempt on my life, I guess. I don't know what we're up to now, 2 or 3. Oh, yeah. To have me thrown in the brig, that would have been worse, actually, than just being taken out. So that was roughly when they did that little attempt to arrest me. That was back in December 2010. And I was literally punching out like the next month. And so, fail, guys. Number 2, fail. Okay, so then in March of 2011, this is March 19th, 2011, I was kidnapped by some State Department thugs, very low-level State Department thugs. 6 of them, one of me. They dislocated both my shoulders and broke my knee. And then they just took turns beating on me for like 3 hours. But you see, I had some skills. I don't believe these guys were informed of any details. I think they were just told to kidnap, torture, and kill just this lady. Her name's Teresa Price, right? Just go after her, right? So I used my skills. Those skills, if you want to know more about those, they're called psychological operations and special operations and prisoner of war training. Okay, so I basically scared them all out of the room one by one until I was left with the ringleader. And I just said to him, I said, look, go ahead and kill me. But before you do that, you might want to go have a look in my wallet, which was in the other room. They took me and my things, and apparently they didn't look through the wallet before that. They just started beating me. And I said, in that wallet, you'll find an active duty ID card and some orders, which indicate I am an active duty field grade officer stationed with the North Atlantic terrorist organization. um, and so NATO knows where I'm at, the DoD knows where I'm at, the CIA knows where I'm at, the State Department knows where I'm at, and the OSI, which is the military equivalent of the CIA, they know where I'm at. So if I don't get on that plane tomorrow, it won't take them long to find you. And you're nothing to them. They'll get you to execute their dirty work, and when it's done, they'll dispose of you. And so, and now this is true. This is exactly this. I wasn't using psychological operations at that point. I was telling him the truth. But he needed to see that for himself, so he went and saw my ID and my orders, and then he took me and threw me in the back of a pickup truck and drove to the hospital and chucked me out on the ground and drove away. So, fail number 3. The following year, also, on the 19th of March, 2012, the Ides of March, right? I was kidnapped by, Fusion Center personnel, and if you're not familiar with that, just look up the term Fusion Center. I'm sure you can find something. It was in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is where I was living at the time. And in a post 9/11 world, we had this organization called the DHS. It's a terrorist organization, essentially. But they get to say who the terrorists are. And according to them, I think it was in 2004 they said this, that the number one domestic terrorist threat in America was the returning combat veterans. So that was me. And then also, because of my background in the TSSCI world, I was very heavily monitored and surveilled and kept on a list. It's like Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. Anyhow, so sitting at a red light, and this Metropolitan Police Department guy, RoboCop guy, gets out of his car. And when I say RoboCop, I'm not kidding, y'all. They have technology that'll blow your mind. To mind control these poor guys in uniform. They're horrifically controlled. So again, no charges, no, hey, I pulled you over because, no, nothing. Just got out, just stuck his gun in my face, his loaded weapon in my face. It was off safety. It was locked and loaded then. That's what we assume in that case. And his finger was just like literally shaken on the trigger. So not a lot I could do there. I not a lot of maneuverability there. I had to essentially get out of the car and comply with my own kidnapping. And they took me to this jail, and they stuck me in solitary confinement, and they wouldn't give me a phone call. I wasn't given any food or any water. I was also kept from taking my medications, which basically kept me zombified, otherwise who knows what would come out. The truth, maybe. Yeah, they did that, and that was a really horrific place, the jail. So at the time, I had been sort of hanging out with this guy who worked for the Department of Energy, which is also a secure container world, very dark place. And he was friends with the judge, so he called the judge, and the judge told them to release me on my own recognizance, that they couldn't hold me without charges. Well, they released me in a pair of handcuffs in a cop car and took me to another jail. because the judge that released me had jurisdiction in this jail, but in this jail they had another judge. Yeah, it's like that. Maritime, maritime corporate law. So they took me to this other jail, and kind of the same thing going on there. But at this point, my friend called back to his judge friend, and his judge friend called one of his buddies who was a judge in that jurisdiction, whatever they call county, zip code. And he got me released eventually. So in total, they held me for a day and a half with no charges. Okay, so I ended up suing the police, and I got like this really small settlement, and the attorney took most of it. And then they said they would seal but not expunge my records. So because it's important to keep a record of you as some sort of a criminal, so that when you get taken out, you know, then oh well, it's no big deal. She was a criminal anyway, right? So anyhow, fail. Next up was very shortly after that. The tinnitus, the ringing in my ears, the thing that all military personnel are diagnosed with upon departure, is tinnitus. This is a disguise to make you believe it's something wrong with your hearing, as opposed to what you're actually hearing are frequencies being beamed at you. You're picking them up through your ears. It's mostly high-pitched noises, but sometimes they can be low-pitched as well, depending on what program they want to download into you. So, yeah, they started in really hot and heavy with that, and I ended up calling the Veterans Crisis Hotline, and they told me I should be hospitalized. And of course I said no, and they said, well, the only alternative to that is to come get your prescription now that we're going to write for you, a new prescription, and pick it up and take it as directed. So I did that, and I didn't even look at the pill bottle, y'all. I just blindly trusted that the VA had my best interest at heart. So I have like really low blood pressure. Not like dangerously low, but it's just low. It's always been low, my blood pressure. And when we go to bed, all of our blood pressures drop, right? It's like the lowest your blood pressure is going to be is when you're sleeping. And she told me to take this pill before I went to bed. So I'll spare you the gory details. But yes, if I hadn't have woken up and fallen out of the bed and low crawled into the bathroom to vomit, I would have choked on my own vomit or died in my sleep. It's just my heart probably would have stopped. Yeah. So yeah, I got up the next morning and researched this drug, and I found out that it's a drug that you give people when they come to the hospital for heart attack, when their blood pressure is like 200 or something really drastically, dangerously high, and you want to prevent them from going into cardiac arrest, you give them this drug. So it's pretty obvious to give that drug to me and tell me to take it before I went to bed. It's, yeah, call me Captain Obvious. That was attempt number 5, and that was what finally pushed me to changing my belief systems a little bit more and leaving. I left the country. After that, I fled to South America. As soon as I crossed the border, my accounts were all frozen. Everything. Brokerage, savings, checking, IRA, everything. So I ended up working around that with some more legal expertise that I had. And, but yeah, to cut somebody off of their finances and leave them stranded in a foreign country where they have no family or relatives or friends to fall back on, that's like murder, right? Can't pay your rent, you can't buy food, right? It's kind of like what they're doing right now with this fake virus shutdown thing. It's another way. It's another strategy, but the objective is still the same. Fail, guys. Number 5. Then the next year, I had to go back to the States to sign some paperwork for the closing of my house. Because I literally, I left the country the year before, just packed my bags and left. I didn't bother selling the house first or nothing. Just put it on the market and left, right? And well, I had to go back to sign this paperwork. And on my way back, I was traveling through the Constitution-free zone of Miami Airport. And the plane was allowed to board, and I was kept off to the side. I wasn't allowed to board, and then this lady showed up in her blue polyester uniform with no badges or name tapes or insignia to indicate who she was or who she worked for. And she basically said, "Give me your passport," just like that, really nasty, not like, "Hi, I'm Joanna and I work for the DHS," or "Can I see your passport, please?" Nothing like that. She's just, it's all meant to trigger, right? And so here's another thing about maritime corporate law. Technically, you're not supposed to give your passport, not supposed to hand it to somebody. You're supposed to hold on to it at all times and just open it to the signature page or the visa page or whatever the page the person's asking for. But technically speaking, anytime you hand your passport over, you're handing over your state-issued identification. And as such, that's the only way that the state recognizes you as a citizen, which means tax slave or enemy of the state. But then you even just give up your slave status and your enemy status, and you become an unknown, and they can do with you whatever they wish. So I gave her my passport because I'm sure she was not aware of this. She didn't seem very well educated. She actually was very mind controlled, and I hope she's doing well. Also, no grudges, right? Okay, so so she just grabbed my passport, and then she started asking me questions like, "Who are you? Where do you work? Who do you work for?" is what she said. And she said, "Where do you live? And what's your business in the United States? What's the purpose of your trip? Who did you stay with? Where have you been?" And all I said was, if you knew what you were doing with that passport, you wouldn't need to ask me any of those questions. Because as an American citizen, I don't need to answer such questions. And she got really pissed. She was already very unsettled, but she became even more unglued, and she basically said, "If you don't answer my questions, I'll have you arrested." And there were like these two, they look like football players in three-piece suits with little earpieces in their ears. Yeah. They were kind of standing off to the corner there, so I bit my tongue, and I said, I just answered her questions, right? And I asked for my passport back, and I indicated that the flight was leaving in 5 minutes, and they were going to close the door any minute, so to please let me on the plane. And she did. So what is that? I think maybe 7. I don't know. It depends on how many of the heart attacks that you count as attempts on my life. Anyhow, now I have a nice little dead man switch, and I also have a better perception of reality. I am Invictus. And I fear nothing. not suicidal. I love my life. I am not a martyr. I have other work to do. And I choose my words carefully so that I do not invoke the terms and conditions of the contract which the off-world entities believe that they can hold over my head. I have a meditation on SoundCloud. It's a gift from my heart to yours. It's for free. You can listen to it. It's a guided meditation called Remember Who You Are. I hope this has been a blessing to you, family. I love you very much. Thanks for allowing me to share this with you. I hope you can remember who you are too. All my love. Bye for now.